Today's talk, as you might have guessed, is about how it works, the way it works. We've talked, and Mykal shared, Mykal's reading, we could have really stopped that, and I'm not going to, because I have a lot more thoughts that I'd like us to delve into and explore. I wanted that spoken message with the music behind it because I wanted us to be steeped in the power of word. I wanted us to let those words wash over us. That when we speak something, when we own it, when we claim it, something different happens. In today's talk, we're going to do several different things. I'm going to do a lesson about our brain. Because a lot of times in the science of mind, we talk about mind and we never connect it with that gray thing up here from which so much of our thinking happens. And when we don't understand how that's working, we may find ourselves doing things over and over again. Or, I'm sorry, I'll take that back. I know that when I don't understand things, I can keep repeating the same mistake. And I'm going to let it wash on you. Maybe it's just my issue and you'll be like patiently listening to me and beholding for me that I access this. So I'm going to review with you some of the notions about the brain, how it works and what we do with it. I'm also going to be touching on a couple of stories because sometimes stories become touchstones that we can use in our lives. There are stories, and it isn't about, is this a true story? Because we've all heard something about fake news. We've all heard something about that process. Do I believe this or not? A story isn't necessarily about belief. A story isn't necessarily about the facts. The story is about the truth at the heart of things and how we can access that truth and how we can use that truth. I'm also going to be talking about some actions we can take. You all know that Stephanie is renowned for her homework.
That's why we have the book under our chair.
And that's why there's well, it actually isn't why. The book under the chair is for something else. It isn't. It is. These are homework things that we may choose to take with us. Because if I don't offer it, then you never had the chance to try it. If I just say, it's a little too challenging, I don't want to do that, then I am belittling you, and I'm belittling what I think you're capable of. So, to get started, in those words about the power of our words. Ernest Holmes, who founded this faith tradition, he never set out to create a religion. He never set out to create a spirituality. He was just reading things and he was talking with people, and people said, you're a good speaker. You should get up and talk. And it started small. It started with him hosting a lesson in somebody's house after dinner. And there was a point in time where he was working with audiences of 200, 300, 500, 1,000, that people wanted to hear what he had to say. People wanted to hear the kinds of connections that he was making. And Ernest Holmes was making connections with philosophers from the East and religious traditions that were not as available as they are now. I mean, people said during the sharing, we can go online and we can communicate with somebody in India. We can go online and we can see things that are happening all over the world. This has not been the way that the world was. When Ernest Holmes was doing what he did in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, he was creating a pathway for many people to access those other parts of the world, to access those other kinds of engaging in traditions. So these ways of thinking about the world. One of the things that Ernest Holmes proposed is, rather than, there's a God that sits up on a throne somewhere in a sky somewhere with a big long white beard, that there is a presence as close as our breath. Mykal talked about it last week. That when we have a moment where we touch absolute peace, where beauty so inspires us, so washes over us, when we have moments when life just feels so vital, when we have joy that we just can't grasp the words, or we can't hold on to it. These kinds of moments, one way of describing it has been called the numinous. It's the encounter with the divine. And I'm seeing nods. I believe that we truly all have had these kinds of encounters. That it is not reserved for those who go to study with a guru and become a guru. What Ernest Holmes was proposing is that the outermost and the innermost God are the same God. And that when we have those encounters, through whatever means that it happens, that we are connecting to that divine. What Ernest Holmes was proposing, what he was inviting us to consider, is that it's as close as our breath. We breathe in and we just celebrate the life that we have. I don't know about you, but I didn't wake up this morning and say, I'm alive because I said let there be life. But I get to restate that. I get to reclaim that. I get to become conscious of that. That each breath in is a gift of life. That each step forward is a capacity that I am expressing in the world. That each one of us are co-creating, moment by moment by moment, with the divine. In the song I talked about, it's as close as an eye. When do we make eye contact and we know that we've made a connection with someone? That eye contact may be enough to change the course of their day. Or it may be enough to change the course of our day. We see that person and we connect with them. And we look with a sense of awe and wonder at the magnificence, at the brilliance, at the beauty, at the immense capacity, at the joy that they bring. That we, in that moment of just that connection, that was one of the things that was said, it isn't about communication, it's about connection. When we make that connection, we are co-creating. Also in my song I talk about, or a star that's farther than we can see or farther than we can imagine. Sometimes our imagination of a greatness is what carries us there. I remember when I first started learning about the science of mind. One of the things that really bugged me was the notion that the process works no matter what I'm thinking. So we have that second song. This is a song by Christine Lavin. And Christine Lavin is a folk singer. And in this particular song, she shares the idea, it's literally called What Was I Thinking? And I'm doing this because I want to talk a little bit about, I don't know about you, but sometimes there is language that I use that I'm not enough, or it's too much, or it's not good enough. So, do you want to bring up that? Right.
Hi, it's February 13th, 2011. Here's my song, What Was I Thinking? And I have a brand new ending for it. Here it goes. It was a last-minute invitation. I did not have a thing to wear. I ran into the store. I said, I need something black, something formal, no. What have I done? What was I thinking? What was I, blind? When I thought this outer must have been temporarily out of my mind. What was I thinking? Look at this dress. My endorphins are sinking. My life is a mess. My hairdresser said, it's time for a new do. You've had that look for way too long. So he shoved me a perm and a magazine, and I thought, sure, what could go wrong? I should have known by the sounds he was making. Oh boy, something was going awry. After 2 hours, I put on my glasses. I could not believe my eyes. What was she thinking? I can't believe what I see. I look in the mirror, Art Garfunkel's looking back at me. What was he thinking? Could somebody steal me a hat? I should look on the bright side. Unlike Art, at least mine will grow back. I put that part in because I thought the song was going to be an international hit. Yeah, what was I thinking? Well, anyway.
So, I just used that song because I'd like to be humorous about those thinking traps that we can fall into. When Christine Lavin shares the story, she's like, I just need something, anything. How often do we find that our lack of specificity about what we want results in the kind of experience that she had? What had she done when the hairdresser said, let's get you a new look? And we just follow like little lemmings. And the new look isn't what we really want. You know, and even the notion that she's singing those lyrics and singing those words from other countries, thinking, oh, this will make this an international piece. Sometimes we just do things without thinking. A lot of times we say things without thinking. There is a power to our thought. There is a power to the specificity. And there's a power to the not thinking. And there's a power to the not specificity. My sense was, I just thought it was unfair. Why isn't spirits doing this stuff? What Ernest Holmes proposed is that spirit is kind of like, the soul is just kind of like a factory that is forever putting things out. Whatever comes in is what goes out. So a thoughtless idea comes in, and a thoughtless idea comes out. So the homework associated with this is, how do we gain control of those thoughtless moments? Find ourselves when that happens. Oh, look at that. I was just thoughtless in that moment. I just let anything happen. I just said, oh, I'll go along with that. And we didn't imagine it. We didn't imagine where it could go. The reaction doesn't have to be this hard, pressing, difficult, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed and look at what I did. It's just catching it. Oh, look, I let this just happen. And I'm going to stop right here, right now, and I'm going to claim instead this. To take back our word and to live more powerfully. I was talking a little bit with Suzanne about a meeting that happened. And a big portion of the meeting that went on, there was this story about what had happened, and then there was the other side kind of not listening. And so the story got repeated, and the other side was still like couldn't get it. And I was saying to Suzanne, really, what they wanted, and they finally said it, they just want an apology. For the past 30 days, this has been happening, and they just want an apology that they've been harassed for the past 30 days. And it's the fault of just an unconscious action that led to an automatic system calling and leaving a phone call that after 30 days starts to feel harassing. Mm-hmm. All they wanted was just an apology. But what was happening was people were like, well, I didn't do that. That's just how the system works. And I was saying to Suzanne, and I didn't step up because I felt that, well, this belongs to someone who's functioning at that kind of level. And I don't have direct power over that. What it taught me is I can just interrupt it and say, I'm really hearing that you need an apology for a thoughtlessness in the system. And we will do what we can starting now to make that stop happening. So on behalf of the system that was thoughtless, I apologize. I hope you can forgive me. So I learned that. And I use that as an illustration because we can be caught in things and that we can get off of that caught very, very easily just by becoming aware of it. Now remember how I said I was going to do a little brain lesson? Mm-hmm. So can everybody make a fist? Oh, good. Okay, and when you make your fist, put your thumb inside of your head. Okay. So now, this is your brain. If you have it so that the fingers are facing towards the front, of looking outwards, well, actually, you could do it looking inward, so you're looking at this self. These fingers are what's known as our frontal cortex. That's that part of the brain up here that does all of our thinking, all of our decision making. It really isn't finished developing until we're in our mid-20s. Sometimes people ask kids, what are you thinking? And they're not, because it's not developed yet.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're really frustrated. I've told you this over and over again, and you're still doing it. That's because it's still connecting the neurons. Now, if we were to lift up that part, we see the thumb. And the thumb is that part of our brain, it's called the midbrain. Another fancy name for it is the amygdala. This part is the part of the brain that's like the reptile brain. It's the fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain. What happens when we get upset? We're going along, and we get upset, and we flip our lids. And we flip our lids, and we no longer have access to this part. We no longer have access to all of those skills. Or I should say, I don't. How many people have ever found that when emotion arousal just seems really high, that it's so hard to be reasonable? That it's so hard to hold on to thoughtfulness and self-control. And we end up acting from this place of fight, flight, or freeze. Now, just this other part, all of this is kind of just what enables us to survive and live in the world. You know, the brain stem and then leading on down. It's what enables us to breathe. It's what communicates to the heart. It's what communicates to all of those autonomic nervous system things. There's all kinds of things that our nerves are doing all the time. In some ways, the soul, that element, that aspect of the divine is like that. It's on autopilot. We have elements of our lives that are on autopilot. So I'd invite us to think about just the fact that I can breathe and I don't have to pause. Did I breathe in the last 5 minutes? We don't have to go through and say, did I remind my heart to beat? Did I tell my intestines and all of my organs to release the different different things that needed to be released. Can you imagine if we were to have to do that, to add that to our daily list? Digestive materials, are you working? I'm going to put my thought on that. Is that working? There is that aspect of our own bodies which reflects what Ernest Holmes proposed about the soul. That there is an element of the divine which is just automatically making things happen. I had us look at our mind at this process because sometimes it's helpful knowing what's going on. I don't know about you, but sometimes to be able to say, oh look, I have flipped out. And seeing that I flipped out, am I in a position that I can say, look, I flipped out, what do I do to get myself back under control? And again, sometimes the idea of just having a physical illustration of our brain can help us become more mindful, can help us come into greater ownership of how we can be in the world. Just another really quick thing about this notion of flipping out. Have you ever noticed that when someone else flips out, we tend to mirror them? We literally have a part of our bodies called mirror neurons that we will pick up what others are doing and we will mirror it back. We're just designed that way. It's one of the joys and one of the drawbacks of what it is to be human and to be social and be in community. We can find ourselves, we're going along just fine, and then somebody just does something and they're like acting like this, and I don't know about you, but I know that sometimes it's very easy to get sucked in. That's called the mirroring. We can also mirror back. I am going to take a deep breath and get myself under control. Sometimes the most powerful thing is to put words to what we're doing so that that other person isn't thinking that we're necessarily ignoring them. Because has anyone ever tried that in a relationship with another person? They're acting all crazy and we're like, la, 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 la. We're not describing our own process. And so then we try to act normal, and we try to act normal, we try to act normal, and they just get more and more exaggerated because they're trying to get us to mirror them. But if we can say, you know, I see you as really upset, and you may not even know this, that you're hoping that I'll get there with you, but I'd rather have you calm down a little. So I'm trying to keep myself calm. That's the brain lesson. And I bring that brain lesson because, practically speaking, if our words are power, if they're power for ourselves, they're also power in our relationships with one another. It'd be easy to forget that. Sometimes we can't hold on to that. So the two stories I want to leave you with about the way it works and the power of the word. Has anyone ever heard Hans Christian Andersen's version of The Princess and the Pea?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In the story of The Princess and the Pea, the prince is looking for a princess, a real princess. And in his kingdom, there's this outbreak of non-real princesses. And his mother tells him, you know, there's a test to determine if someone is a real princess. And they do these tests, and nobody measures up. Nobody anywhere. And the prince is starting to despair. There's actually a musical called there's a musical that Emily was in. But what happens one stormy, stormy night? Someone arrives at the castle, and they're a mess. But she claims to be a princess. And they're like, oh gosh, another phony. What are we going to do with this? So the queen says, okay, let's get a bed all ready for this princess. And what they do is they put a pea on the bottom of 20 mattresses, and then there are all of these things on top. And she wakes up the next morning, they're like, how did you sleep? And they're expecting that, as a phony princess, she'll say, oh, it was beautiful because I had all of these eider downs and I had these beautiful mattresses. And she's like, oh, I've never had a more horrible night in my life. And there are several points about the story. Don't judge a book by its cover. The other thing is that a princess, she had this horrible night because it took the one pea to unsettle her sleep. The soul, that aspect of the divine, is like that. We can think that we have everything cleaned up in our lives, but we may have a couple of residual ideas that we just cannot let go of. And so life turns out looking crappy. And we're thinking, why is this happening to me? I do all the things, I say all my affirmations. Why is my life still crappy? Sometimes there's a hidden belief that when we don't get what we want, it's our opportunity to find out, what am I still holding on to? What am I still believing that I didn't even know that I'm believing? So the princess and the pea with the so sensitive princess, the disturbed princess, tells us about the divine. The divine is just making things happen. The other story I want to tell you about is from the Gospels that tell stories about this guy named Jesus. And Jesus had been doing all kinds of healing for folks. And one day, the centurion came to him. And he said, hey, I hear that you are really good at fixing things. I have this servant of mine who is taken ill, and I couldn't bring him with him. And I really would love for him to be well again. And Jesus responds to him, it's done according to as you believe. That's a message that Ernest Holmes used, that it's done as we believe. In that story, Jesus was impressed at the authority of this person. The centurion didn't say, hey, you have to come to my servant and you have to lay hands on him and fix him. That because the centurion was a person who knew his authority, he could also recognize the authority of this Jesus person. And he trusted that if he just said the word, he's healed. And Jesus was saying back to him, it's done as you believe. Jesus wasn't claiming it's done as I believe. He was saying it's done as you believe. So the stories are, what do we believe? When we catch ourselves saying, not enough, can't, impossible, too much, overwhelming, when we catch ourselves, take that moment, we have flipped our lids. Pull our lids back. And say, oh, my mistake. My bad. I just said it's impossible. I'm going to replace that with, what's another way to say that you could say?
This is a world of possibilities. Who
Okay.
knows?
Okay. What could you say?
I can't think.
Okay.
It hasn't happened yet.
Tan?
Something else that I would like.
Okay.
There's another one that I do. It's called if I think it's impossible, I don't want it.
So when we find ourselves saying those words, pause and think of what else we could say instead. When we find ourselves proudly holding that sign, not enough, or I'm sick. There are times that we have put these identities because they were successful at getting a certain kind of attention. They got us through the life in a certain way. Take it off. We can choose. And we can put on something else. So the way it works is we have the power of love. We have the power of presence. We have the power of beauty. We have the power of joy. We have the power of peace within us. Let's make the journey back to that. However far we've flipped out from that. And bring ourselves back to that. Consequently, I say, and so it is.
And so it is.